Welcome to everyone who is streaming in. I am Madeline Schwarz. I am your host of Speakeasy. I am a communication coach, and what I do is solve one problem that everyone in this room has in common, and that is how to articulate your vision and communicate what you do and why it matters in a way that other people understand. So welcome to this great crowd at Speakeasy. Today's topic is career storytelling, and I am delighted to be joined by my guest, Irene Ryan. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I see there's 32 people listening. Thank you all so much for joining. And Madeline, thank you so much for inviting me on as a guest. I'm Irene Ryan. I'm a career coach, but I coach in an unusual way. I believe that everyone can land an impossible job, whether you're going for your first internship, full-time job, a promotion, or completely switching industries. I'm really passionate about helping students and women in tech, primarily, with their career changes. So I was just so excited to be here.
Thank you for joining, and I see a few more people have joined, so welcome again to Speakeasy, which is the best place to be to get in on the secrets to effective communication. And to start us off, when we're here talking about career storytelling, and I am really curious, what do you find is most challenging for people in terms of telling their career story?
Sure, and Madeline, I'd love to hear your answer to this question too. I think a lot of the times it's deciding what career story you want to tell, because basically I would say your career, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, it's your brand, it's your marketing. So you get to decide how to tell it. And sometimes that's the struggle. And I get this a lot from questions from clients where they'll come to me and say, I want you to help me in writing a generic resume. And I say, there's no such thing as a generic resume. Right? You have to know where you're going in order to get there. And I always think that you should tell your story and write your resume and your LinkedIn profile like you already have the job you want. But you have to figure out what job you want first.
Yeah, I think that's such a good tip. And why would anyone want to have a generic resume? And, the thing that I find is really challenging for clients is editing their career story. And that, they sometimes think they need to put every single thing they've ever done in their entire 20 or 25-year career, or maybe it's just 10 years, but they, feel like they need to start at the very beginning instead of be their own editor and really decide what story they want to tell and take charge of shaping the story. And so I don't know how many people we have here who have seen Goonies, but that's what I always think of when people struggle with this, that scene when the robbers ask the kid, tell us everything you've ever done. And he starts with what he did in third grade. And so when people are asking us about our experience or to tell us our story, we don't need to start in third grade.
I agree. I have this concept that especially your resume and your LinkedIn profile too, they're the movie trailer of your career life, right? They're not the whole movie. So remember, it's a trailer. So the whole purpose of a resume or LinkedIn profile or a career story is to get people interested enough to want to call you or talk to you more or find out more, right? And then they might get the full story as you go through an interview process and you develop a relationship. So that's the one thing I always tell people. It's a movie trailer, not the full story, because if you try to give too much information at once or you try to be everything to everyone, you'll be nothing to no one. Too much information at lunch is like you want a drink of water, but instead of being in front of a water fountain, you're standing in front of a fire hose at full blast. We're it's too much information, it's too much water, so you can't take a drink and you can't absorb any information. So being concise, and slimming it down is actually going to be more strategic.
I love the idea of the movie trailer, because what I always tell people is you want to share just enough to get people interested and have them ask you more questions. right? If you share too much too soon, you overwhelm them and they're suddenly like backing away with their eyes glazed over. And so the movie trailer is just a great analogy for what you want to do with the highlights. And so I see we have 60 people here, and I want to do a quick poll of the audience. So you can use the react buttons at the bottom of your window for this event. Who in the audience feels like their resume or their LinkedIn profile accurately reflects your career story?
I'm seeing some hands pop up.
I'm seeing a couple thumbs up. All right.
I'm seeing about 12.
Yeah. Okay, great. And who feels like they could use a little bit of work on having their resume or LinkedIn profile better reflect the story that you want to tell? All right. Yes. I'm so glad you're here. And I see there are a few people with their hands raised to speak, which is great. We'll take questions in another 9 or 10 minutes. So jot your questions down and raise your hand again to share those. So what, Anne, is the biggest mistake that you see on resumes and LinkedIn?
What we think we covered one of them, which is making your resume and LinkedIn the full movie, not the trailer. So that's the number one. And then the next thing I see is that I'd like you to think about your resume and LinkedIn as your career story, right? And so we'll just use a diff. So like on a resume, probably if you have, anywhere from 10 to 15 and more years of work experience, you'll have a professional summary, right? Anything you mention in the summary, which should be your 3 unique selling points. That's the strategy that I use. You decide on what your 3 unique selling points are. They are in the summary in some way. Everything in the rest of the resume are examples backing up your 3 unique selling points, right? So you're telling a story. So you're basically kind of like in the summary being like, this is what I'm going to show you, right? And then you show it throughout the resume, right? And you also show progression of like how you've progressed through your career from in any order in which you want to show it. So I hope that makes sense, where it's like you want to tell us, like, your whole resume is a story. You want to show progression in the story. And you want to basically tell people what you're going to tell them and then keep reinforcing those points throughout the body. That's what I find is most effective. And it doesn't matter if someone reads your summary and goes, great, pick up the phone and calls you right now. You don't care that someone's not read the rest of it. They've got enough information. But if they do keep reading, you want to basically keep reiterating and repeating and reinforcing all the things that make you an excellent candidate. And the same goes for your LinkedIn profile. I think that's why you have an about section in the work experience. So anything you mention in your intro section or about needs to be backed up, with examples.
And so in terms of not being afraid to reiterate the same story, I wonder if you can just talk a little bit more specifically about that as far as differentiating one job from another. If, assuming, like, let's say people have had stayed at a job for 3 years and they have a few of those on their resume.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, you can. So if you've been promoted and you've had more and more responsibility, then you can tell that story. Like maybe you led a team of 3 and now you had a team of 6, and then you were leading a team of 15, and some of them were direct reports and some of them were 2 levels under you, right? So you might be able to show progression in that way. You can also decide based on your 3 unique selling points, which is the gut reaction question. And I'm going to go on a slight detour here. Here's the question I want you to ask yourself if you're wondering what your 3 unique selling points are, but it needs to be your gut reaction answer. So you can do this after the call. You can do it now. Just if I were to be sitting in front of you and say to you, what are 3 things that set you apart from every other candidate, right? What are 3 things that you bring to the table that no one else brings? Your gut reaction question, the first 3 answers are likely going to be right, 99.99999% of the time, right? So once you figure those out, right, and you put them in your summary, and you want to showcase them throughout your resume, you can do it throughout each job, right, showing progression, Or you can decide this job I'm going to use to showcase my team management skills. And this job I'm going to use to showcase my communication skills. And this one is really going to showcase my project management skills. Like you can decide, right? So that would be what I would suggest.
Yeah. And
that makes sense. But yeah.
And I think that's so helpful too, when you think about, you know, in the case of someone who has 15 or more years of experience and is still trying to keep their resume to a single page, to choose how each different experience is going to highlight one of your 3 selling points, as opposed to trying to have every experience highlight all 3. So then you can be that much more specific.
Also remember, you want to think about your target audience, which is your reader, right? Like think about it. I used to be they're sitting there reading resumes, like just hundreds of them at a time, right? So the easier you can make it for them, the more likely they're going to like you and want to pick up the phone to talk to you, right? So like think about if you've seen a resume with like a block of text where it's like just bullet point after bullet point after bullet point after bullet point, right? It just looks like a paragraph. It's really hard to read. And your brain takes a lot of computational power to do that. But if you make things in short sections and make it a story and make it fun to read, then someone's going to be very, very happy, and they can almost turn their brain off while reading your resume or LinkedIn profile. That's way more fun, I think.
Yeah. And I'm curious if this comes up for your clients, but if people have had, like with my clients, I sometimes have people who are unsure about how to explain a career gap. And I'm wondering what your perspective on that is.
Okay, cool. I have a couple of thoughts on this. So one, you don't owe anyone an explanation as to why you have a career gap. So if you want to put something about it on your LinkedIn profile or resume, you can, but you also don't have to, right? LinkedIn now actually allows you an additional work experience to add a career gap. So you can, but you don't owe anyone an explanation. The second thing I'd say is that sometimes if you're just like, hey, I just want to have like a something filler in, right? And you had a career gap, you could talk about your volunteer work. You could talk about some projects that you did on your own, right? If you have a company that you run, and it's consulting, you can talk about that. Do you know what I mean? So there's different things that you can do. But I honestly have this opinion, and I've seen it more and more as the years have gone on. Like, I think there was, I don't know, I want to say like 5 to 10 years ago, like people would see a career gap and immediately be like, explain this. And I think now, especially with COVID and just progression, like it's much less of an issue, right? For people to have a career gap, because people know it's like you have to take time off to, do you know what I mean? Like deal with stuff and deal with life, or raise children, or take care of a family member, or take care of yourself, right? So I think it's much less of an issue. And on a case-by-case basis, you know, I would just talk it through with a coach or talk it through with a friend, and like kind of like feel yourself out and see how you want to handle it. But if you have a gap, that's not a problem. You can just leave it in.
I love that perspective, to just not feel like you have to explain it. And it makes me think about another thing that comes up with my clients of interviewing sometimes for positions where they might not have the exact list of qualifications in the job listing, and they are competing against, you know, let's say like they come from a wholesale background, and if they work in retail, fashion retail, and now they're applying for a job that's not wholesale, right? Like more on the product side in the retail stores. And that instead of trying to explain to hiring managers why their experience is just as good as someone who has that exact experience, to instead answer the question of why your experience is better. And to do that work ahead of time, because it just completely shifts how you're feeling about it when you have an answer for why your unique experience is better than all of the competition. And then instead of selling them on, you know, how your different experience really measures up, you're like, no, you just don't understand actually like what I've done is better and uniquely qualifies me to do this job and be an asset to the organization.
I agree with that. That's something you can think about and figure out how to word far in advance. And I actually read, related to what you just said, Madeline, I read about a study that was done by Harvard University, the Carnegie Foundation, and Stanford Research Center. And the study says that 85% of your career success is determined by your soft skills. It's not your hard skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's your 85% is your soft skills. So even if you are changing industries or don't exactly have that, that exact background, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Your skills transfer.
Yeah. And I definitely believe that stat because communication falls at the top of all of the leadership rubrics and in all the research of something that companies are looking for in job listing. The one caveat that I would give it is I hate the term soft skills because I think of them as essential skills.
I agree. I like that terminology much better.
Yeah. So I do want to open it up to the audience for questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. And the one thing I will say is there are so many people here. So if you are very long-winded, I may cut you off or mute you. So please keep your questions brief so that we can hear from the most people and answer all of your questions. So I am unmuting, bringing up Rose and Katerina. All right, please.
Hi, Katerina.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, hi, nice to be here as well.
Hi, do you have a question that you want to ask us?
Yes, so my question, I think you kind of briefly referenced this, but how do you tell your story when there isn't a lot of concrete pages or movie footage of your experience?
Katerina, could you expand on that a little bit? What do you mean by not a lot of concrete pages or movie footage?
Like job experience, or I was tying it back to your movie trailer, but not a lot of experience. For me personally, I have a few contract positions or an internship, but not a lot of it. Probably, I've tried to get as much experience as possible, but some of it is more administrative work or things that I've kind of just kept to experiment almost.
Okay. Madeline, is it cool if I go first and then
Yeah, go first.
Yeah. Okay. Katerina, that's a great question. I have a couple of thoughts. I'm just arranging them in my head. So one thing is it's okay to not have a lot of experience, right? I also want to just say that because 85% is soft skills, the jobs that you've had where you're trying things out or might be more administrative can really showcase your soft skills and you should keep them on. Even if they're not exactly like in the industry that you want, because you can showcase your things like project management, time management, communication, leadership, critical thinking, decision making, conflict resolution. You can showcase a lot of those skills through those roles. I would think. Okay. Secondly, too, is if you look at the job that you want, and sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off. I just want to make sure I remember to say this. If you look at the job that you want, look at the experience that you have and figure out what the gap is, which I like to call the delta, right? Mm-hmm. And then your job is to figure out how to fill in that gap as quickly and as dangerously as possible. And what I mean by like you becoming dangerous is like you can volunteer, you can take an online course, right? Like you can develop your own project and like get those skills that you're needing, get that experience in. And I mean, as quickly and as dangerously as possible. Right, okay. If you want to beef up your resume. So,
and would you say, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm done.
Would you say that telling that story of like your leadership skills or, the administrative, project management, is that more important than having those, I helped with this project and, with this, and this was the ending, or this was the product of it? Those kind of 150 clients with, X amount of money and this is how it happened. Like that's how I've always thought of resumes, is that you want that concrete, this is what I did, this is what happened. But I feel like that leaves out the soft skills or the essential skills.
Well, you want both.
Mm-hmm.
You want both. And so data, your human brain loves numbers. We love numbers. We love metrics. We love data, but they're best in the context of a story. So if you have like those experiences that have those concrete numbers, that's great. You can add them. But what I want to just say is like jobs that aren't exactly in the industry that you're in, right, can also showcase a lot of really great things about you and only add to your profile, not take away from it. So I was giving this example, and it's all right. I know I'm going to be slightly long-winded, but I'll try to sum it up in 45 seconds. So I was giving a presentation, and someone in the class said, and she was a college student, she said, I have this part-time job, but I don't have it on my resume right now because it's not related to the field I want to go in, which is science. And I said, well, what's your part-time job? And she said, I work at a restaurant. I said, how many hours a week do you work at the restaurant? She said, 20. I said, I'm looking at your resume and you have a really good GPA. You're involved in all of these leadership groups. You have roles and like responsibilities in these volunteer groups. You're also involved in a sport. Plus you work 20 hours a week, I'm assuming, to help pay your tuition. She said, yes. I said, it 100% needs to go on your resume because you're a full-time student. You're working 20 hours a week and you're involved in all of these things. Your time management is off the chart. You're hardworking, you're tenacious, you're a go-getter. Like I would rather work with, if I had to choose between a student with like a 4.0 GPA but no work experience and you, do you know what I mean? Like I would pick you every time.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good to know because I have that experience too. Like a serving experience, but it's not, with the field that I want to go into.
And yeah. I just want to jump in with a thought, Katerina, because for any interview that you're on where the hiring manager might have also worked in a restaurant at some point, they will know what incredible training that is in terms of people skills and communication skills and customer service and things that are so useful in corporate environments. And so when I'm working with people, with clients, one of the things that I really focus on is called the communication triad, and that's the message, the mindset, and the delivery. And so for you, I would really think about how you can shift your mindset around the experience that you do have instead of the experience that you don't have yet, because you don't need to disqualify all of the experience and the jobs that you have had.
Okay. What was the first one?
The message, the mindset, and the delivery.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Rose.
I missed that.
And actually, my question is also kind of jumping off of what Katerina was talking about. So I wanted to answer two questions. Number one is it better to omit jobs that are irrelevant or seemingly irrelevant, or is it better to try to make the connection between the job that you're applying for and the job that you have or had in the past? That's number one. And number two is, sorry, listen, I'll go back to number two later. I'm just collecting my thoughts, but if you could answer that one, thank you.
Anne, do you want to go first on that?
Sure. I think so, Rose. The answer is it depends. It depends what you want to showcase about yourself and what story you're telling, right? And there's a lot of different ways to do that on a resume and a LinkedIn profile. So a couple of things I could just say. The answer really is it depends. And I usually work with clients on this on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes if you want to showcase a particular company name or a particular job title you had, you might add it. You can also have an additional experience section that lists the job titles and the company names, but no explanation if you want to like show someone that you've had this role, but you don't have room to embellish on that, right? Sometimes you can also say, like, when we're talking about the movie trailer instead of the full movie, right? If you give people too much information, they won't get anything. So like maybe going back 10 to 15 years in your career, I know there's more behind that, but maybe you just want to keep it to 10 or 15 years to kind of focus the reader on what they want to know. So I hope that helps. I think the ultimate answer is it depends. And Madeline, I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, well, just going with the idea of the movie trailer and the movie, I just think about my own attention span for movies, and that anything that's over 2 hours, I have, just makes me angry and makes me think that the director had no constraint. And so I think we can exercise that same idea when telling our own story. And if there is something that seems irrelevant, why not leave it off and then highlight something else in its place?
Yeah, the question because I was struck by when you said you don't have to explain the career gap, I guess, on your resume. I was so curious about that, if you could expand on that, because sometimes they do ask you directly in the interview to explain the career gap. So how would you navigate that?
Well, I'll just jump in with one quick thought first, which is that I think mindset can have can be a huge part of this, because if we think it's normal and something that isn't a big deal, then we don't feel the need to have a really lengthy explanation of it, and if we do get asked, might just simply say what we were doing with that time, as opposed to justifying what we were doing during that time where we had to take a career break.
I agree with Madeline. I think it's something that you should think about ahead of time. Like, if you get asked this question, what would your response be? And what do you feel comfortable sharing? Right? Like, did you take a sabbatical trip to fulfill your lifelong dream of traveling around Asia? Do you know what I mean? Did you take time off to take care of a family member? Do you know what I mean? Like whatever the story is you want to tell, you just decide that ahead of time, so that when you are asked that question, do you know what I mean? You're not flustered and like trying to justify it. Yeah, I say just deciding what you want to say beforehand.
Yeah, and for the resume structure for people who are in career transition, is it better to not do a reverse chronological resume? Is it better to do like a hybrid resume? What do you suggest on presenting the information? In which way would be more appealing?
Again, I think it depends. Sometimes what I like to do, and what I see a lot of times, is that people will put just one section and call it like work experience or professional experience, and then just list like everything under that. And what I think you can do to make your resume break up a little bit more and it's easier to read, but also you can kind of direct the reader to different skill sets that you have, is to actually split up that work experience into sections. And label them in some way. Like, this is my leadership experience. This is my customer support experience. This is my management experience. This is my volunteer experience, right? So that might be one way to sort of split everything up, and also kind of tell the reader what you want them to know about you, like making it very easy to kind of see the different things that you bring to the table, and then also breaking up the sections, because then that's not technically reverse chronological order, because you don't actually have to use that. Like, if you want to highlight a different role, you can put that first. Just depends what you want to highlight, right? But breaking up into sections also makes it a little bit more difficult for someone to sit there and build out a timeline of your resume.
But wouldn't that affect the ATS if you did it like that? Because it's not.
So I'm just keeping an eye on the time here. And so I invite you, Rose, to reach out to Anne personally with more specific questions that you have. And Anne, thank you for all of these amazing tips. And where can people find you or best connect with you?
Yes, if you have any questions about what we talked about here in relation to anything career transition, you can feel free, please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find my profile. It's just linkedin.com/in/Anne Irene Ryan. So I'm there. You can also find me at my email address, which is ann@AnneIreneRyan.com. Feel free to reach out. If I can help you quickly, I will. If your question is really cool, but I can't answer it, I will try to put it on a future LinkedIn post. So please connect and follow with me for that. And if it requires longer, I will direct you to my booking link and you can book a one-on-one session.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to everyone who has joined today. And what I would love for you to do is share one of your takeaways in the comments for this event so that other people can learn from it. And for anyone who wants more help telling their career story, speaking up in meetings, and give giving presentations that engage their audience. I invite you to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you more about how I can help with that. And if we're not already connected, please connect with me on LinkedIn and join us at the next Speakeasy on June 20th. So thank you so much for coming, and I can't wait to see your takeaways.